Hold on to your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Thank you for joining us. This is the NFL Draft Recap episode. I am happy to be joined by one of my fellow Jet fans, longtime friend, met him in college, cool dude, Rob Oslinker. Thank you for joining the show. How's it going, man? How are you?
It's going well, Matt. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the show.
So me and Rob met at college, both played I play guitar, he plays bass. We started jamming together, and then we started realizing that we both are suffering Mets and Jets fans. So Rob, why don't you tell the listeners about your football fandom, and then we'll jump into all this draft stuff here.
Absolutely. As Matt mentioned, we've bonded and shared our mutual interest in both the Mets and the New York Football Jets. We're diehard Jets fans. I've been watching them lose AFC Championship games since 1998, and looking forward to hopefully, watching them build upon a promising although disappointing year last year. And I'm hoping that we could even get out to some games at MetLife Stadium, watch Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell and the boys, hopefully have a winning record and bring them back to the playoffs, because it's been far, far too long.
Yeah, I think the last game we went to was Jets at Bengals week 17 of, I think it was 2009 or 2010, one of those years that they then played the Bengals again in the first round. But speaking of the Bengals, the first round recap, why don't we get started with the Cincinnati Bengals, who picked first overall. They went after the quarterback from Ohio, Joe Burrow. There were four quarterbacks taken in the first round. Tua Tagovailoa went with the fifth pick to the Dolphins. Justin Herbert went right after him to the Chargers, and then Jordan Love, the 26th pick overall, to the Packers. Was there one of those that stood out to you, Rob? Because I know the Jordan Love pick was something that we will get into later on in this podcast as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Tua T. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name out of respect for him, because I know I'll butcher it. As someone who follows the AFC East closely, I'm interested in seeing what the Dolphins do with Tua. He's, a very interesting quarterback prospect coming out of football powerhouse Alabama and Nick Saban's program. As a lefty, national champion. I'm curious to see what kind of role he takes. I wonder whether he's going to be a backup behind Ryan Fitzpatrick. Does this also mean that the Dolphins have given up on Josh Rosen, their quarterback draft pick from, 2 years ago?
Well, they actually traded for him. They the Cardinals drafted him, but then the next year they traded for him because they knew that they were going to go out and get the little guy. I can't even think of his name now. Quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. This happens to me every once in a while. But, yeah, man, I'm excited to see what the left-hander can do, too. It's going to be fun getting to play them twice a year, because he seems like a pretty competitive dude. Looking at the offensive linemen of the first round, we had 7 offensive linemen go, 1 center to the Saints, and then 6 tackles. The Giants, Browns, Jets, Titans, and the Buccaneers all used their first pick on a tackle. The Bucs actually traded up a spot to get their left tackle for Tom Brady, and the Dolphins used the second of their 3 picks in the first round on the replacement for Laramie Tunsil, which, what do you know, they gave up for a first-round pick. So it's funny how things come in full circle sometimes. These wide receivers in the first round, this draft could very well go down as the the wide receiver, the year of the wide receiver. 6 wide receivers go in the first, and another 7 went in the second round. So altogether, 13 wide receivers go in the first 2 rounds. The AFC West got the boys from Alabama with Henry Ruggs the third, and the Raiders get Jerry Jeudy to the Broncos. Sorry about that. The AFC West got both of them, but Ruggs went to the Raiders, Jeudy goes to the Broncos, and then CeeDee Lamb goes 17th to the Cowboys. The Eagles get their wide receiver at 21 with Jalen Reagor. The Vikings replace Stephon Diggs with Justin Jefferson, a guy from LSU. And then the 49ers trade up from 31 to 25 to get Brandon Ayuk. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, particularly those 2 guys in the AFC West who were teammates and are going to be playing each other for twice a year for hopefully the next 10, 12 years for those guys. I know I was all about trying to get one of these wide receivers in the first round. Rob, you were all about trying to get a tackle in the first round. So why don't you give us a little bit of something? Give us something about these linemen and these wide receivers that went in the first round.
Sure. Matt, as you know, my philosophy in regards to football and winning football games is that games are won in the trenches. As much as I love the big, athletic, superstar receivers and the personality that they bring to the game, it starts up front with the big uglies, big offensive linemen. And I was very happy to see our beloved New York Jets pick a tackle in the first round to protect Sam Darnold. And I think they got a good one with Mekhi Becton, the 6'8", 365-pound.
6'8".
He is an absolute monster. And I think his father, as a quick anecdote, his father is probably the largest human being I have ever seen in my life. It was funny to see, on draft night, like the footage from his home when he got picked. His dad is a very large man, probably pushing 450 pounds, if I were to imagine. I had people texting me asking whether that was the Jets draft pick. I was like, no, bro, that's his father.
So then you got to figure he's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious to know whether the Jets picked the right tackle of the 4, because the Giants at selection number 4, they decided to go with Andrew Thomas from the University of Georgia. I honestly, with the 4 tackles that went in the first round, you can't really go wrong with either of them from what scouts are saying. And it's interesting to note as well that the Jets passed on Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, which is, a breeding ground for offensive linemen.
Right.
Iowa just produces offensive linemen like crazy. Like every year there's a big time offensive line prospect coming out of Iowa. But I like, my prediction was that the Jets were going to pick Mekhi Becton, and they did. And I think he's the true tackle of the group. I mean, he can't, he's not going to play guard like some of the other guys. He's not versatile. Like he's a true tackle.
Right.
And I'm really excited to see him throw guys around on the field and just be an absolute monster.
Yeah, I'm sure Sam Darnold is just as happy about it. All right, so we got another 3 or 4 position groups to get through here. So let's pick it up a little bit. So the 6 cornerbacks go in the first round. The Lions and the Jaguars take corners in the top 10 after both of those teams traded away a Pro Bowl cornerback in Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey last season. Atlanta drafts A.J. Terrell to fill the hole left by Desmond Trufant. The Raiders take the second Ohio State cornerback in the first round, Damon Arnett. The Dolphins use their 3rd first-round pick on Noah Agbenagni. The only way I'm going to remember that is I'm just going to automatically go back to Benny Agbayani, which, Rob, I'm sure you remember that, dude. The Flying Hawaiian. He was good.
Benny was the man.
Yeah.
What a name.
And then after trading back to the 31st pick, the Vikings take cornerback Jeff Gladney, the 4th cornerback taken by the Vikings in the first round in the last 8 drafts. They love drafting corners in the first round. And then onto the defensive line. So we had 2 tackles and 2 edge rushers go. Chase Young goes 2nd overall to the Redskins, giving them 2 first-round edge players on defense. The Panthers begin their rebuild with the first of 7 defensive players taken in the 2020 draft with the big Derek Brown. San Francisco uses the pick that they got from the Colts for DeForest Buckner to trade back one spot and still get their defensive lineman, Javon Kinlaw. And then the Jaguars take Clavon Chason to pair with first-rounder Josh Allen from last year. So that Jaguars defensive line just keeps getting better by the week. Then looking at the linebackers. So we had 4 linebackers go, starting with Isaiah Simmons to the Cardinals, who could join Darwin Thompson and our boy Jamal Adams as what I like to call tight end erasers, which is exactly what the Cardinals need after being historically bad at covering tight ends last year. Then the Chargers add another playmaker to roam the middle of that defense in Kenneth Murray. Watching him and Darwin James is going to be fun. I'm excited about that Chargers defense. And then the Ravens, they fill one of their biggest needs with Patrick Queen, the 4th of 5 LSU Tigers to be taken in the first round. What did you think of these linebackers that all went in the first round, Rob?
I like the Jaguars' selection of K'Lavon Chason. I hope I'm saying his name correctly.
Yeah, I definitely butchered it.
At 6'4", 255 pounds, he's an excellent pair or a combination with their second-year pass rusher Josh Allen, and it helps the Jaguars move on from potentially losing Yannick Ngakoue, which it looks like they're going to since he's requested a trade. Same thing with Jordan Brooks in Seattle. It helps them move on from Michael Kendricks, and he pairs very, very well with Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, and it improves upon a disappointing Seattle defense from last year, and hopefully it'll allow the Seahawks to get back to having a top 10 defense, which they've been known to have in years past. Last year they were, they regressed, but I mean that combination of Brooks, a first round linebacker talent along with Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright makes them very formidable. And also I think it's very interesting in terms of the Baltimore Ravens. They went after Jordan Queen from LSU, who's an undersized linebacker at 6 foot, 230 pounds, arguably considered the best inside linebacker in the draft, and who will fulfill the role of Patrick Onwuesor, that dynamic undersized inside linebacker who left to play for our New York Jets, and a player who I really look forward to watching play because he is a rare talent at the inside linebacker position. He could cover, rush, very dynamic, very capable in both the pass and the run game. And Jordan Queen is the player that the Ravens hope will take over for Onwuesor as that jack of all trades middle linebacker.
Right. And then rounding out the first round, we had the Kansas City Chiefs take the first running back of the draft in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who caught 55 balls in 15 games last year, second most catches amongst running backs in college football. And we know how much Andy Reid loves to get his running backs involved in the pass game. So a couple things that stood out to me from the first round. CeeDee Lamb that goes to the Cowboys with so many holes on defense. Amari Cooper's $100 million deal this offseason, and then the Cowboys using a third-round pick 2 years ago on Michael Gallup. I was kind of surprised that they went wide receiver, but you can't blame them when a guy that talented is sitting there staring at you.
Absolutely.
Two teams that used their first pick on a position of strength. You just alluded to one of them. The Seahawks take linebacker, even though they have KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner. They might have been better suited for them to go after an edge rusher, since it seems like they're not gonna be re-signing Jadeveon Clowney. And then the Titans, they take a tackle at 29th overall, even though they got Taylor Lewan and Dennis Kelly both signed through 2023. So I don't know if this dude's really going to be playing anytime soon. Maybe they decide to kick him into guard and and groom him for when one of those two guys inevitably does retire. But kind of interesting. So let us get to the second round standouts. The first round guys get all the hype, but there's plenty of really good football players that get drafted in the second round. So to me, the 33rd pick, the Bengals take T. Higgins after using the franchise tag on A.J. Green. I thought Cincinnati had one of the most underrated fly-under-the-radar receiving cores going into the draft with Green, Tyler Boyd, and John Ross, and now they get another wide receiver with both give them some depth in case AJ Green gets hurt again, but also Higgins, gives him time to learn. You hear a lot about how wide receiver is one of the harder positions for rookies to adjust to. It's not very often you see a rookie year like Anquan Bolden roll around from wide receivers. With the 34th pick, the Colts get T.Y. Hilton, a running mate at wide receiver, by using their first pick on Michael Pittman. He's going to be looked at as the number 2 there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually takes that number 1 spot. They got another wide receiver in the 6th round as well, so that's Desmond Patman, who played with Gardner Minshew at Washington State in that air raid offense. So 2 wide receivers go in the first 2 picks of the second round. Looking at the 35th pick, the Lions take the second running back in the draft in the second round with DeAndre Swift from Georgia. He was a big-time player in college, and you don't draft a guy like that in the second round for him to split carries, in my opinion. So, which is why I'm kind of worried about Kerryon Johnson, who was also a second-round pick in 2018. Johnson missed 6 games in 2018 and another 8 games last year. And he was already kind of in line to lose some carries to Bo Scarborough, who actually had a higher yards per carry than Johnson did last year. In more games played too, so not looking good if you're a Kerryon Johnson owner in Dynasty. And then 38th pick, the Panthers take defensive linemen back-to-back first and second rounds, and they actually drafted all defensive players with their 7 picks. So that first set of picks in the second round, definitely some big names and some big impact players. The next one to me is with the 41st pick, the Colts used their second-round pick on running back Jonathan Taylor, who profiled as like the most prototypical workhorse back, the guy you give the ball to 20 times a game. Obviously, this is bad news for Marlon Mack, who also was in line to lose out on some touches to Nyheim Hines with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback who loves throwing the ball to running back. So, Rob, so far in this second round, any of those picks really stand out to you? You got anything to add in about those guys?
In regards to those guys in particular, admittedly, no, I don't have really anything to add. I think you did a great job of breaking down those particular picks. What stood out to me in the second round, I liked what the Giants did with the 36th pick, selecting Xavier McKinney from the University of Alabama. Mm-hmm. He's considered to be the top safety in the draft and who should be a day 1 starter, replacing Antoine Bethea.
Yep.
Many scouts compare him Patrick Chung, being that type of safety, that type of role player in the secondary. What I found very interesting as well is with the very next pick at 37, the Patriots, with their first selection in the draft, selected a Division II prospect, Kyle Duggar, from Nor Rhine. Shout out to Division II football. You and I both know about Division II football very well from our Bloomsburg Husky days.
Oh yeah,
quite a bit of very, very good Division II football in our time spent at Bloomsburg. But as we both know, and I think you'll agree with me, there is a big competitive difference between D2 NCAA football and the National Football League. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to transition to the NFL. Bill Belichick, he must know something that nobody else does.
Yeah, it takes balls to take a Division II guy in the second round, especially after they've let so many of those big time defensive players for them walk away. But yeah, it's definitely gonna be fun to see, what he turns into and what Xavier McKinney turns into. And I know the Jets got a safety that you're pretty high on as well, so we'll get into him when we hit up on the third round. But to continue on with the second round, so the 43rd pick, the Bears take tight end Cole Kmet. They signed Jimmy Graham, then released Trey Burton a week before the draft, with Jimmy Graham showing showing him what's up. He averaged 130 targets in 3 seasons from 2011 to 2014 with 46 touchdowns. And Matt Nagy, as the play caller, he was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City in 2017 when Travis Kelce had the team high 122 targets. So I think Cole Kmet could be a good sleeper if Mitchell Trubisky can pull it together. And even if he doesn't, we all know Nick Foles has shown he can support good tight ends as well.
The Bears are who we thought they were.
2017, Foles targeted Ertz 23 times in 2 games. 2018, Foles targeted Ertz 50 times in 5 games. So he definitely likes to throw the ball to his tight ends. Hopefully whichever quarterback plays in Chicago can keep Cole Kmet going. 45th pick, the Tampa Bay adds another young piece to their secondary with safety Antoine Winfield. Last year, the Buccaneers had 4 defensive backs that played over 50% of the snaps that were drafted in the past 2 years. So a lot of really young guys there. But as we know, our defensive coordinator down there, Todd Bowles, he's definitely much better as a coordinator than he is as a head coach. But if there's one thing that he's good at, it's coaching up DBs. So I'm sure that all those young guys will get plenty of work there. With the 46th pick, Denver goes wide receiver with back-to-back first and second round picks. They take KJ Hamler from Penn State. I've heard a lot about how Denver is this huge sleeper now that they have this stacked wide receiver core with Courtland Sutton, Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, but their quarterback is still Drew Lock, who only played 5 games last year, and he had about 30 yards less per game than the league average, and he had over a half yard per attempt less than the league average. So I'm not gonna jump all over the Drew Lock Denver Broncos hype train just yet. I still think under Nick Fangio that wants to run the ball. That's why they signed Melvin Gordon, even though they had 2 good running backs on their roster. And I think they want to play defense, man. 5 of this year's draft picks were defensive players. And then just rounding out the 40s, at least in the second round, the 49th pick, the Steelers take wide receiver Chase Claypool from Notre Dame with their first pick. The Steelers are one of the best franchises at developing wide receivers for the past 10-plus years. They've turned draft picks into Pro Bowlers, including Juju, Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant, Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace, Antonio Holmes, and of course Hines Ward, who I didn't even realize this going into the draft is a wide receiver coach for our New York Football Jets. How cool is that?
He was a wide receiver coach all of last season. That is true.
And so I'm excited to add this Chase Claypool dude in one of my FanDuel lineups week 1 as like a super duper sleeper because I think the Steelers are the best team at brewing up wide receivers. You got anything quick to add on any of those guys taken from 39 to 49?
Yeah, I like the Bears' selection of Cole Kmet. I've read a lot of people questioning that pick, thinking that they have more pressing needs elsewhere. But the fact is they need to improve upon their 31st ranked tight end unit from last year. And I think him, drafting Cole Kmet along with signing the veteran Jimmy Graham gives them a formidable tight end pairing. And especially with this guy being 6'6", 260, he's got that big prototypical tight end, modern day NFL body type for Mitchell Trubisky to utilize in the passing game. The Bears, they should definitely have a much improved tight end and going into this upcoming season. That I do like that pick quite a bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He should be pretty good. With the 55th pick, rounding out the second round, the Ravens took another young running back in J.K. Dobbins. They drafted Justin Hill in the 4th round last year, and they signed Gus Edwards as a unrestricted free agent in 2018. So they now have a set of 3 runners to kind of grow with Lamar Jackson, along with the juggernaut that is Mark Ingram. Dobbins makes me worry about Ingram, though, who was the number 8 running back in half PPR last year. I doubt he even finishes in the top 12 now with them bringing on J.K. Dobbins. And then at 62, the Green Bay Packers, I guess they felt like they didn't screw up big enough with their first pick, so they went out and they drafted a running back in the second round, despite having Aaron Jones, who finished as the number 2 running back in half PPR last year and the number 3 non-quarterback overall player behind only Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas. So this kid, A.J. Dillon from Boston College, might phase out Jamal Williams or both him and Aaron Jones. Dillon is drawing comparisons to Derrick Henry right now because of their pretty much identical combine measurements. It's kind of freaky if you go and look at them. It's hard not to look at what the Titans did in 2017 when they drafted Derrick Henry in the second round, even though they had DeMarco Murray on the team. Matt LaFleur was the head coach of that, who's the head coach of the Packers, was on that Titans coaching staff when they decided to do that. So we could be seeing the beginning of a big shift with the Green Bay Packers. Let's jump into the third round here, and let's start with the Jets at 68th overall. They get themselves the safety from University of Cal, Ashton Davis. From what I've read and heard the night of the draft, he's an uber athlete and super versatile. I was listening to Boomer and Gio actually on The Fan the other day, and they were interviewing Jets GM Joe Douglas, and he said he fits the mold of a guy that defensive coordinator Greg Roman wants on defense, and the team sees him as someone who can come in and immediately be a dominant force on special teams, is what he said. I don't understand using a third-round pick on a guy that you see as a mainly special teamers, but if you're telling me he's going to play the role of that roaming linebacker / safety, the dude who can cover a tight end but also be effective blitzing and play the line of scrimmage against the run and do all that, he sounds a little bit too much to me like Jamal Adams, who we already have. But Rob, I'll let you defend that pick because I know you're excited about this kid.
Yes, I am excited about the potential that this kid brings to the table. I like the fact that he's a true underdog. He walked on at Cal. He walked on to the track team as well as the football team. He's got world-class speed. He ran, I believe, a 4.3 at the combine. He combines his excellent speed with versatility. He started games at both corner and safety at Cal. I envision him as someone the Jets could use as a nickel safety or like a center fielder to be like that third safety on the field at the same time as Jamal Adams and Marcus May in the Jets defense. I think he could allow the Jets to employ Jamal Adams more as like the roamer around the line of scrimmage, and to help out and run support more. I see this kid also potentially returning kicks for the Jets. And maybe even punts to spell Braxton Berrios every once in a while. But I like the potential that this kid brings to the table. I could see him playing. I could see him getting a lot of playing time as the third safety as well as the third corner on the field in nickel and dime packages.
What about the 79th pick when the Jets went and they get Jabari Zuniga, defensive end from Florida? Hopefully he's nothing like Jaqui Pulite from last year, who was cut before the season even started. How you get yourself cut as a third round pick before the season even starts, I don't know. But what do you think of this defensive end that they get from Florida?
Yeah, I feel as though like Greg Williams must have saw something on tape that he likes about this kid, and I feel as though a big reason why Jaqui Pulite, the reason why he was cut was probably because Greg Williams didn't like what he saw from him. Uh-huh. Kid has a lot of upside from what I understand. He's coming off injuries, but he's got explosive speed. I feel like the Jets have a pretty formidable defensive line. I feel like this guy could be a good rotational lineman, maybe like a situational pass rusher coming off the edge. I feel like it's one of those low-risk, potentially high-reward picks, barring that this kid can recover from injuries that he sustained his senior year in college.
Yeah.
I think it's worth rolling the dice and taking a gamble on him, and I'm hoping that Greg Williams could utilize him to his full potential.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, let's move on. We got a couple minutes here, but we got a lot left to go to, so we're definitely going to go over on this podcast, but that's all right. There's a lot to get to in this draft. So the 80th and the 81st picks, the Raiders take two wide receivers with back-to-back third-round picks in Lynn Bowden and Brian Edwards. Bowden is a super versatile guy. They can give him the ball as a running back. He takes snap as quarterbacks. He can run routes, return kicks. He'll be the Raiders' gadget player with John Gruden. We'll have fun scheming up some plays for him. Brian Edwards fits more of the deep threat mold. He's 6'3", and he's a physical guy, so he's going to be fun watching running alongside Henry Ruggs. At the 84th pick, the Rams take defensive end Terrell Lewis, who had a bunch of injuries at Alabama, but if he can get coached up, he should be one of the steals of the draft, getting him in the 3rd round. At 86, the Bills get their presumptive replacement for Frank Gore with the 5'9", 223 bowling ball that is Zach Moss. Have fun and go watch his film from college. He just ran through dudes. The 89th pick, the Vikings used their 3rd rounder, Cameron Dunsler, the 2nd of 5 defensive backs drafted by Minnesota, 2nd of 3 corners. They had 3 corner spots to fill, and they did that. So good on them. The 92nd pick overall, the Ravens take their first of 2 wide receivers in the draft with Devin DuVernay from Texas. He was 3rd in college football with 106 catches. One of only 4 players with over 100 catches. The other wide receiver Baltimore took in the 6th round was another one of those 4 guys that had over 100 receptions. The Ravens were very, very busy in the 3rd round. 93 overall, the Titans draft a complimentary back to Derrick Henry with Darrington Evans. He's a fast dude. He was also a kick returner. He seems like he's going to fit very well in that Titans zone rushing scheme. Quick one thing about him, 482 carries in college with no fumbles, so Mike Vrabel's going to like that. At the 98th pick, the Ravens take Malik Harrison, the 2nd linebacker they drafted to replace their pair of linebackers they lost in free agency. Harrison and Queen should benefit from the improved defensive line in Baltimore with the additions of Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe. At 103, the Eagles get their much-needed linebacker with the super versatile Davion Taylor. This dude is interesting. He played very little football, only 1 high school game because of religious reasons, and only 24 college games. But he is apparently a poor man's Isaiah Simmons with crazy explosiveness, the speed for a linebacker. Explosive speed for a linebacker, and he's a short tackler. He might even be able to cover tight ends, so he's going to be fun to watch. And then with the 105 pick, the Saints take my dad's boy, Adam Troutman, tight end from Dayton, Ohio. 6'5", 225, which is an inch taller and 5 pounds heavier than George Kittle. So that kind of puts you in perspective of what kind of size this dude has. He fits the perfect mold of a tight end. He's got the body control of a former basketball player, also a former QB. He's going to be in a great spot with Drew Brees, who knows how to throw big tight ends open, and they're definitely going to dust off some of those Jimmy Graham plays. So overall with the draft, the team, there was 3 teams, 4, no, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, there were 6 teams with over 10 selections. The Vikings had 15, the Jags and the Dolphins had 12, the Eagles, Patriots, and Giants all had 10 picks. To me, the biggest winner in the draft is the Ravens. They get the linebackers they need. They get 2 defensive tackles to shore up that run defense. They add depth on their power running offense with another running back and 2 guards. Then they go and they get 2 more speedsters at wide receivers. The Ravens, to me, continue to just dominate drafts. Even without Ozzie Newsome, they've been doing a really awesome job for the past couple years. The Broncos add 3 wide receivers and a pair of interior offensive linemen to completely restock on offense. And then one team that we both agreed on, the New York Jets. Why were they winners, Rob? Go ahead.
Well, I believe the Jets were winners for a couple of reasons. They got their franchise left tackle in Mekhi Becton, which who I spoke of earlier. The big wide receiver, Mims from Baylor, fills the void that the Jets had with Robbie Anderson leaving in free agency. He's a big, fast receiver at 6'3", runs a 4.3 40. Excited to see what he could bring.
Yeah, I think he could even possibly be better than Robbie Anderson. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. He
has that type of potential. And I spoke to not too long ago Ashton Davis, the underdog, safe college walk-on at Cal, and as well as some later round offensive line and defensive line depth that the Jets added, in addition to also a backup quarterback and a very good punter prospect who I'm excited about. Defense wins champion. I'm old school when it comes to football, Matty. You know this, and games are won in the trenches, but and with that, field possession matters as well. So I get excited over good punts.
I think I saw the Jets and the Falcons are the only teams to draft punters, so yes. That'll be a fun thing to track, is which punter stays in the league the longest. The Bengals are another winner to me. They get their hopeful quarterback for the next 10 years. They add depth to a strength by taking T. Higgins in the second round, and then they add 3 linebackers to fill those big needs that they had in the middle of the defense. Excuse me. Like I said, the Cowboys, they get CeeDee Lamb with the third wide receiver off the board. Could be an absolute steal. They get good replacement players with Trayvon Diggs, corner, the guard Tyler Bedaz, and defensive end Bradley Anu. And then the Saints, like I mentioned, they only had 4 picks, but they were all solid picks to me. First-round talents at center and linebacker, a tight end that some are saying he's the best in the class. And to me, the quarterback is an interesting pick. So they get Tommy Stevens from Penn State. I think he's going to go right to the practice squad, and he will be eventually the backup to Taysom Hill, in my opinion, in a year or two when the Saints hand the offense over to Hill and they try and convert into a power running team. We see in the Ravens, if you're going to run an offense that puts your quarterback at high risk like they do, you got to have a backup that fits that same mold, and I think Stevens looks like a perfect poor man's version of Taysom Hill. Some second-tier winners to me got the Colts. They get that wide receiver and a big-time running back. They also get the eventual replacement to at quarterback with Jacob Eason. The Rams, they get a potentially starting running back that also should fit perfectly in their zone running scheme. Some are saying Cam Akers might be the better back on that roster right now, so that's going to be an interesting one for us fantasy footballers to pay attention to. Like you mentioned, the Giants, they had some serious holes on the offensive line and in the secondary. They get 3 offensive line, possibly a lockdown corner, and a steal of a safety in Xavier McKinney with just their first 5 picks. You look at the 49ers, they get the defensive lineman to replace DeForest Buckner. They get the wide receiver to play opposite Deebo Samuels. They get a promising tackle to go along with the newly acquired Trent Williams to fill Joe Staley's spot. So I think the 49ers did really good things. 2 other quick teams that I think did pretty good. The Browns, they fill holes at left tackle, and they go with to go along with their newly signed right tackle, Jack Conklin. The draft some depth at guard. They also bring in another tight end that looks like he's going to be a good run blocker. And they could have a steal at wide receiver with Jonathan Peoples-Jones. He probably won't play all that much because the Browns will most likely use that 12 and 21 personnel. They saw it last year. They played Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb on the field at the same time a lot. Austin Hooper and David Njoku will probably play a lot in the 2 tight end sets that Kevin Stefanski loves. And then the last team for me, the Chiefs, with a lot of returning players for their championship team from last year with the QB on a rookie contract. The Chiefs were able to kind of take a luxury pick with the running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Andy Reid said he's better than Brian Westbrook, which means a lot up here in Eagle territory. They also got a inside linebacker that they needed. They lost their Kyle Fuller, and Brashad Braylon get into some trouble last week, so that might come back to haunt them waiting so long to take a corner. Then there's a couple teams that, they filled a couple needs, like Arizona, the Redskins, Falcons, Lions, Raiders, Bills. They had a couple nice picks. But there's a bunch of teams that I'm not really sure what to make of their draft. Bears, Texans, Titans, Seahawks, Steelers. To me, not really all that much impressive. But the losers of the drafts, what everybody's waiting for, the Packers, to me, were the biggest losers by far. To me, it does not get any worse than drafting a backup quarterback in the first round. But on top of that, they traded up to do it. They take a running back in the second round, completely ignore the wide receiver position, which makes no sense in this draft, which could be the deepest wide receiver class of all times. And then, sorry, Philly, but I think the Eagles are also a loser. I think, Rob, you had the Eagles as a loser as well, right?
I did. I thought they reached and they took an unnecessary gamble with selecting Jalen Hurts in the second round. I feel like they could have waited until the third round, potentially maybe even the fourth round to select him. With Carson Wentz under contract, selecting Hurts, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's been a lot of, criticism of his ability to throw the ball. He's more of a runner, more of an athlete, maybe like a Taysom Hill, Brad Smith type of player.
Right.
They also settled for the fourth best receiver in the draft, CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. They were those echelon type guys were selected before the Eagles had a chance to take their receiver, and they missed out on CeeDee Lamb at the Cowboys' expense, which has got to hurt as well. So sorry Eagle fans, sorry everyone down there in Conshohocken where Matt's at. The Eagles, they could have did a lot better in the draft.
I agree. Two other teams that we have as losers. We'll wrap up the podcast with this. The Chargers, they decided not to trade up to go get Tua Tagovailoa, and they end up with Justin Herbert to compete with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. They did not address left tackle at all after trading away Russell Okung, and they waited until the fourth round to get their replacement of Melvin Gordon, which is good news for Austin Eckler, but I think at some point this season, they're going to need a running back that's, bigger than 5'9", maybe 200-pound Austin Eckler. There's just no replacement for one of those, on 4th and 1 when you need a dude to get you that rough yard. You need a guy that can stick his nose in there. And then one team that maybe I'm just trying to rub it in, but the Pats traded up twice in the third round to draft 2 tight ends. They also ignored the wide receiver spot despite a glaring need. Rob, I know you were not going to pass up this opportunity to say that the Patriots were losers as well, so I'll let you kind of put a bow on the Patriots and the podcast here.
Absolutely. Whenever I have the opportunity to talk smack about the New England Patriots, I will gladly, take advantage of that opportunity. There are not many things in the world I dislike more than the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
They picked a Division II safety in the second round, first pick in the draft. Again, maybe Bill Belichick knows something that the rest of the world doesn't. He probably does because he's Bill Belichick after all. They drafted a kicker. I feel like that they could have picked a kicker, in the supplementary draft or in free agency. In the Canadian Football League, I don't feel as though they really needed to draft a kicker. But again, maybe this guy will be like the greatest kicker of all time. Who knows? Yeah,
maybe he's the next Gostkowski.
Right.
Who knows?
And they also, they took some linemen who are, in day 3 after, all the highly touted lineman prospects were already off the board. So are these guys going to be camp bodies, or are they going to round out the roster? In New England, you never know what New England's thinking. They probably, know a lot more than any scout or any pundit or any critic of the draft.
Or two schlemiels like me and you sitting here talking about the draft. He knows what the hell he's doing. I'm sure he saw something in the kid.
But at face value, it doesn't look too impressive, but only time will tell. We shall see. But I would like to believe that the Patriots goof big time.
Yeah.
I'm going with.
So, all right, man. Well, hey, this went a little bit over than we planned on. Hopefully my boss, if you will, doesn't get too mad. But hey, it's good content. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And Rob, thanks again for joining me. I look forward to having you on again. I think we talked about definitely having you on for when we do the AFC East recap. So thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. I look forward to doing it again.
For sure. And may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.